Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Grace Holloway, and I've been practicing urology and men's health right here in the States for over 20 years now. In those 2 decades, I've sat across from thousands of guys, and let me tell you something. The number one worry I hear, especially from men who've been around the block a few times, isn't about their cholesterol or their blood pressure. It's whether they measure up. And today, I want to tackle this from a completely different angle. Because if you've been on my channel before, you've heard me talk plenty about average penile length. But here's the thing, nobody's really explaining to you. The other half of the equation. How deep is the average vagina? And once you understand that, I promise you a whole lot of anxiety you've been carrying around for years is going to melt right off your shoulders. Now, before I dive in, I want you to stick with me all the way to the end because around the 4-minute mark, I'm going to share something with you that in my 20 plus years of practice, I found matters way more than size ever will. It's the one thing I wish every guy over 50 knew, and almost nobody talks about it, so don't click away. All right, let's get into it. You've heard me say before that when researchers measure erect penile length, or stretched length, which is a pretty reliable stand-in, the worldwide average comes out to about 5.4 inches. That's it, 5.4. And when you look at the full range, 95% of men fall somewhere between 4.2 and 6.7 inches. That means if you're sitting there at home thinking you're small, odds are overwhelming that you're actually right in the normal range. And get this, 99.7% of men, nearly every single guy on the planet, has a penis shorter than 7.3 inches. So all those numbers you see floating around online, the stuff in adult films, the locker room bragging back in high school. That's not reality. That's fantasy. And I've had to tell that to more patients in their 60s and 70s than I can count because this stuff sticks with you your whole life if nobody corrects the record. Okay, so now here's where it gets really interesting. And this is the part most folks have never heard. For a man to comfortably be intimate with his partner, the vagina has to accommodate him. Simple enough, right? So the obvious question is, how big is the vagina really? And the answer is going to surprise you. I know it surprised me back when I was a resident, poring over textbooks at 3 in the morning. There have been several solid studies on this. One of the best was published in the International European Gynecology Journal. Researchers used MRI scans on 80 healthy women, and they found the average vaginal length was about 9.8 centimeters. For you and me, that's roughly 3.9 inches. 3.9. Let that sink in for a second. The range went from about 5 centimeters on the short end up to 14 centimeters on the long end, or about 2 to 5.7 inches. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Doc, hold on. That's way smaller than I expected. How does anything even work? And that right there is the question nobody answers properly. And it's the reason so many guys walk around feeling inadequate for no good reason at all. Here's what's going on. When a woman becomes aroused, really genuinely aroused, not rushed into things, her body goes through some pretty remarkable changes. Both the length and the width of the vagina can nearly double. That's not an exaggeration. It's biology. Her body literally prepares itself to comfortably accommodate her partner. I'll come back to this in a minute because it's the single most important takeaway from this whole video, and it's the piece that changes everything. Let me give you some more numbers real quick because I want you to see just how consistent the science is on this. Another large study looked at over 3,200 women who came into pelvic floor clinics. Guess what the average came out to? 9.4 centimeters, or about 3.7 inches. Another study out of a hospital in London measured 50 premenopausal women, and the average was 9.6 centimeters, or about 3.8 inches, with a range from roughly 2.6 to 4.9 inches. And then there was a study of over 500 women specifically focused on sexual function. The average, there was 9.1 centimeters for sexually active women, and 8.9 centimeters for those who weren't, with the full range running from about 2 to 5.1 inches. So, pull all that together, and here's the bottom line. And I want you to remember this number. The average vaginal length at rest is about 9 to 10 centimeters, with a normal range of roughly 6.5 to 12.5 centimeters. That's the baseline. And the vagina, by the way, is wider up near the cervix and narrower near the opening. At the opening, the average width is about 17 millimeters, roughly 2/3 of an inch. Near the cervix, it opens up to about 45 millimeters or 1.8 inches. These are just anatomical facts, and knowing them takes a lot of the mystery out of things. Now, here's where I want to spend some real time, because this is the part that changes lives in my exam room. That process I mentioned, where the vagina changes during arousal, it has a name. Doctors call it tenting. And here's how it works. When a woman is genuinely aroused, her uterus and cervix actually pull up and back, and that lengthens the vaginal canal by a full 1 to 2 inches. On top of that, the vaginal walls relax and expand outward, giving more room and more flexibility. So that 3.9-inch average you heard about, during real arousal, it can easily become 5 or 6 inches of comfortable, pleasurable space. Your 5.4-inch average penis fits that like a glove. But, and this is a huge but, and I want you older gentlemen especially to hear me on this, tenting doesn't happen in 30 seconds. It doesn't happen because you're ready. It happens on her timeline, not yours. And in my 20 years of practice, I'll tell you the single biggest complaint I hear from women about their male partners across every age group, but especially from women married to guys our age, is that their husbands rush. They skip the runway and try to take off cold. And then the guy gets frustrated because things don't feel right, or she's uncomfortable, and he blames his size. 9 times out of 10, it's got nothing to do with size. It's timing, it's patience, it's foreplay. That's the physiological truth. And it's something I wish somebody had sat my generation down and explained when we were younger. Now let's talk about something else I hear a lot, particularly from men in their 60s and 70s. The fear that their wife has changed down there over the years, that after kids, after menopause, after decades of life, things are somehow different in a way that affects intimacy. And I get why folks worry about this because there's a ton of bad information out there. So let me set the record straight with what the actual research shows. Age barely moves the needle. We're talking about a decrease of roughly 0.08 centimeters per decade. That's less than a millimeter every 10 years. Over an entire adult lifetime, the average woman's vagina shortens by less than a single centimeter. You will not notice that. Nobody will notice that. Height and weight play a tiny role. Taller and heavier women tend to have slightly longer vaginas, but again, we're talking small differences. Menopause brings about a 0.17 centimeter decrease on average. A hysterectomy can reduce vaginal length by about 0.63 centimeters. Other pelvic surgeries might have a small effect, but here's the kicker. None of these differences are enough to affect sexual comfort or pleasure in any meaningful way for most couples. They're measurable in a research study. They are not noticeable in a bedroom. So why do some women feel, as guys sometimes put it, looser than others? Let me address this head on because it's a question I get asked constantly, and there are a lot of myths floating around that frankly hurt a lot of marriages. First, and most importantly, it has absolutely nothing to do with how many partners a woman has had in her life. Nothing. Zero. That is an old wives' tale, and it is medically false. It also doesn't come from frequency of sex. The vagina is a muscular organ, not a stretched out rubber band. It doesn't work that way. What actually affects vaginal tone and elasticity? A few things. Genetics plays a role. Just like some people are naturally more flexible or have looser joints, some women have naturally different connective tissue. Certain neurological conditions can have an effect. Hormonal changes, particularly around menopause, can shift things a bit. And the biggest one, the one I see all the time in my practice, is pelvic floor weakness. Childbirth, aging, and lack of exercise can all weaken the pelvic floor muscles, and that can change how things feel for both partners. The good news? It's almost always treatable. Pelvic floor physical therapy and Kegel exercises work wonders, and they're not just for women. Guys can benefit from them too, especially when it comes to erectile function and bladder control. But that's a video for another day. Okay, now I want to come back to the big takeaway, because if you remember nothing else from this video, I want you to remember this. The average vaginal length at rest is actually shorter than the average erect penis. Let that sink in for a second. Shorter. But because the vagina expands so dramatically during arousal, and because real intimacy involves time, patience, and genuine connection, Most couples fit together just fine. Beautifully, in fact. Factors like age, height, weight, menopause, and previous surgeries have basically no meaningful impact on vaginal length for the vast majority of women. Having multiple past partners doesn't change anything. And if you've got an average-sized penis, you can absolutely, completely satisfy a partner with an average-sized vagina. Full stop. Of course, everybody's different. Some women have longer vaginas, some shorter. Some men are above average, some below. But the overwhelming majority of couples out there are, biologically speaking, a perfectly good match. The problems I see in my office almost never come down to anatomy. They come down to communication, confidence, and knowledge. The very things this video is trying to give you. Now, I promised you at the beginning that I'd share the one thing I've learned in 20 years of practice that matters more than size. And here it is. Ready? It's this. A woman's satisfaction in the bedroom has almost nothing to do with your measurements and almost everything to do with three things: how present you are, how patient you are, and whether she feels desired. That's it. That's the whole secret. I have had women in tears in my office telling me their husband is too big and it hurts. I have had women telling me their husband is too small, and they're still the happiest couple I know because he takes his time and makes her feel like the only woman in the world. The number on a ruler is, I promise you, the least important variable in the whole equation. And for you gentlemen who are a little older, who maybe haven't been as active in the bedroom as you used to be, or who've been worried about performance, here's what I want you to focus on instead of size. Focus on your cardiovascular health. Get your blood pressure checked. Watch your blood sugar. Stay physically active. All of those things directly affect blood flow, and blood flow is what drives erections. If you're struggling with erectile function, talk to your doctor. There are more options than ever, and a lot of the shame that used to be attached to these conversations has thankfully faded. There's no reason to suffer in silence or to feel like your best days are behind you. They're not. I also want to remind you about the power of honest conversation with your partner. If you've been married 30, 40, 50 years, I guarantee there are things you've never talked about. Things you both assume the other person knows or thinks. And I've seen couples in their 70s completely revitalize their intimacy just by having one honest conversation about what they actually want and what actually feels good. It's never too late. I mean that sincerely. Some of the happiest, most in-love couples I've ever treated are folks in their 80s who figured this stuff out late in life and made the most of every year they had left together. So here's my homework for you today. First, take a deep breath and let go of the size anxiety. You've been carrying it around long enough. The numbers are on your side. Second, the next time you're intimate with your partner, slow down. Spend twice as long on the lead up as you think you need to. Let her body do what it's designed to do. And third, if you're dealing with any physical issues that are getting in the way, erectile function, low energy, whatever it is, don't tough it out. Come see somebody like me. That's what we're here for, and I promise you there's no question you could ask that would shock me after 20 years of doing this. Before I wrap up, I want to thank every single one of you who's been watching this channel and sending me your questions. You all are the reason I keep making these videos. Men's health, and especially the health of men over 50, has been ignored and stigmatized for way too long in this country, and I'm on a mission to change that, one video at a time. If this video helped you see things in a new light, do me a favor and hit that like button. It really does help the channel reach more guys who need to hear this. And if you want to go deeper, I post new videos every week covering everything from erectile function to prostate health to hormone optimization. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss anything. If you've got a specific question you'd like me to answer in a future video, drop it in the comments. I read every single one and I pick topics based on what you all are asking about. And for those of you who want even more, behind the scenes content, early access to videos, ad-free viewing, and monthly live Q&A sessions where you can ask me anything in real time, consider joining my channel membership. The link's down in the description. Thanks so much for spending a few minutes with me today. Remember, knowledge is the best medicine, and you are absolutely worth taking care of at any age and every season of life. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves out there.